Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. We're here for a brand new match preview as Wolves will visit Nottingham Forest this weekend. Again, Wolves hoping to get a more positive result. It's been a tricky few weeks for the Wolves. Ever since that defeat in the FA Cup, the season seems to have slowed down massively for Wolves, and another frustrating weekend last Saturday at Molineux with the controversial offside decision as well. So a defeat last week for Wolves. It was a defeat for Nottingham Forest as well against Tottenham Hotspur. We'll get into all of that later on in the video, and of course we'll have the opposition preview as well. If you want to hit that like button, let's try and get to 150 likes on today's video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as we're approaching 17,000 subscribers, which is fantastic. So thank you very much. But yeah, Wolves will be hoping to get back to some sort of normality. We look at the fixtures coming up. Obviously Arsenal, which is a tough game, but we pretty much after this game got 3 home games in a row, and a real big opportunity for Wolves to try and get some points back on the board. Like I said, I think it was still a long shot, but I think last week against West Ham United, some sort of points there, obviously a win, would have put us in a great position, and in my opinion still would have been definitely in the conversation for Europe qualification. Whereas there were some people in the comments that after the West Ham game saying, Dave, look, you're well off there. But genuinely, I think if we had beaten West Ham and held on, I think our first half performance, showed that we could have gone on to win that game. But unfortunately now I think it's slowed down a lot. Now you look on the flip side of that, Nottingham Forest under Nuno, it's going to be very interesting to see what sort of reception he gets from fans. Of course, did such an unbelievable job for Wolves. Unfortunately, it ended not on the greatest of terms, but mainly because of how it finished, with it being COVID and so on. And, I got really emotional that last day when he left, during COVID it's still, and we had a limited amount of fans back at Molineux when we played Manchester United. I got really emotional when Nuno had gone. But look, we've both moved on as a club. We've gone in, we've had our third manager since Nuno. So things have changed quite drastically, and he's got a slightly different challenge on his hands now, where he's playing for Nottingham Forest, who are dangerously towards the bottom of the table. Point deductions haven't really helped them, and refereeing decisions really haven't helped them either. We talk about Wolves having bad VAR and refereeing decisions. Nottingham Forest are also in that same boat and have been very frustrated by certain referee decisions. I know they had some controversial shouts last weekend against Tottenham as well. But when you actually look at it, I was Googling it earlier to maybe make a graphic, but Wolves are still the only team not to have one VAR decision go our way this season in regards to something getting overturned in our favour. Everything that's happened has been against Wolverhampton Wanderers. So really interesting. Whereas Nottingham Forest, although they've had bad decisions, they've had, I think, 3 or 4 decisions overturned in their favour. So, it's still not great, the standard of officiating. We could do a whole podcast or our video talking about that in the Premier League. And I've seen today they're bringing in the semi-automated offsides from next season, which I think will speed things up a lot. But I think Forest will be up for this. It's going to be a tough game because I think Forest are going to be up for it at their place as well. Been very, very close games between Wolves and Forest ever since they've come into the Premier League. Obviously, we had the game in the Carabao Cup against them, which turned out to be a little bit feisty as well. And Nuno now is reunited with a couple of former players, Willy Bolly, who is injured for this game, Morgan Gibbs-White, who started to find that bit of quality that I think Wolves fans deep down know Morgan had. But, he's burnt the bridges really with the Wolves fan base. So I don't think it's ever anything that Wolves fans don't tend to want to admit, quality sometimes. But for Wolves, some decent news in regards to team news. Obviously, Gary O'Neill will do his press conference tomorrow, which is Friday. Any big updates, I'll do a video on. If not, we'll post about it on the Talking Wolves social medias, at Talking Wolves everywhere if you want to drop us a follow. But good news is Matheus Cunha seems like he's back in really high intensity training now. Could he be on for a start, even if he gets 50, 60 minutes on Saturday? I think that would be a huge boost for Wolves. He came on against West Ham, had a little bit of an impact. Also, Jean-Rick Bellegarde back. Looks like he's back in full training now. Again, even if he's on the bench, I think that'll be a big boost for us on Saturday. As well as Hwang Hee-chan and Craig Dawson as well. Hwang, before the Asia Cup, was on fire, scoring so many goals. If we can get him back, even if he can chip in with a few goals between now and the end of the season, that will be a big boost. And Craig Dawson as well. Defence has been okay, but I think again, Santi Bueno's been good as well. I think Max Kilman definitely misses someone with that leadership like Craig Dawson. And genuinely wouldn't surprise me to see him come straight back into that squad on Saturday as well. But I don't know, but all of those are really big boosts, and I'm hoping that Gary O'Neill gives us a little bit more clarification and information. Ryan Aït-Nouri did come off injured as a precaution against West Ham, and it sort of all fell apart after that, really. So I'm hoping that if Aït-Nouri is fit, that will be a big boost for Wolves as well, and hopefully we do get that cleared up by Gary O'Neill on Friday. Have a quick look at my predicted lineup anyway ahead of the game. I think Sarr will again keep his place once again. I think this will be the back five. I think Hugo Bueno may come in for Doc. I think Doc was poor on Saturday, if I'm honest. And I think Santi Bueno may well keep his place. But it wouldn't surprise me to see see Craig Dawson come straight back in. Lemina and João Gomez in the middle of the park. And then I would go with the front three of Aït-Nouri if he's fit, Cunha and Pablo Sarabia. So pretty much the same team really I predicted last week as well. There were a couple of changes we saw. Obviously Cunha didn't start, Aït-Nouri started up front with Sarabia, but I'm hoping that's the team, and I'm hoping Wolves can push on and get 3 points. I think it is that there's a big chance we can go on to win the game. We've got the quality to win the game, but like I said earlier, Forest, although they're down towards the bottom of the table, they're still making life difficult for some teams, scoring goals as well. So Wolves have really got to be up for it, and just in front of goal, they've been a little bit goal shy, or not being ruthless enough at the moment in front of goal. But we'll move on to the opposition perspective now. I spoke to George again from the 1865 Forest podcast to get his thoughts on Nottingham Forest, their chances of survival, and how life is under former Wolves boss Nuno Espirito Santo. So then, guys, delighted to be alongside George from the 1865 Forest podcast to get the home perspective ahead of this weekend's game. George, thanks for jumping back on Talking Wolves. How you keeping, man?
Oh, good, mate. Yeah, good. Thank you. A lot's changed since we spoke back in November, but yeah, doing good, mate. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, it was a pretty close game in the end. I know at the time it was, Steve Cooper was just about clinching onto his job, and I think that result at Molineux gave him a few more games, but ultimately he was let go. And I mean, we haven't really spoken since, but our former manager Nuno returning to England to manage Forest, which I'm sure we'll touch on as well. But George, try and give me a quick summarisation of Forest's situation at the moment. Sat in 17th place. Level on points of Luton, who are currently in the drop zone, and obviously having that little bit of a point deduction, which has really sucked you into this bottom three or this relegation battle. What's been your thoughts, and what's the mood amongst the Forest fan base right now?
Well, I think coming into the season, obviously finishing a couple of points above the relegation zone, 16th last year, naturally the fans wanted us to progress, but it's never that easy. And you look at teams that maybe do so well in the first season and then drop off, like Sheffield United a few years ago, didn't they finish 8th and then got relegated? So I think finishing there, you're not at danger of that. But I think we quickly realised that maybe we didn't get the progression that we wanted. And we look competitive in matches. I mean, last season that we went through a period where of about 10, 12 games where we just like a championship side in waiting, we weren't competing, and maybe that didn't reflect in the scorelines, but you just thought we're not going to get a kick here. Whereas this season, at the Fulham game just before when we played you when we lost 5-0 is probably the anomaly, because in pretty much every game we've looked like a semi-decent side, even losing 3-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at the weekend. It's not an awful result, and Spurs are a better team than us, but we still competed, we still created chances, and we still look like a Premier League side, albeit not as good as them. So I think the mood in the fan base, the point deduction has really brought it back together, because there was a bit of uncertainty about how fans were feeling towards the manager and his selections and the players. But I think now, because everyone's realised this is a situation that we're in, it's sort of brought back the positivity and the unity that served us so well last season, that really got us over the line. And it's good to see that, because Forest are better, and we've played some of our best football, when all the fans are behind us. So whether fans are behind the manager long term or not, I think at the minute everybody is focused on the end goal of getting us over the line.
Yeah, I was looking at your fixtures. We did a podcast earlier this week, and we were talking a little bit about Forest. And I think really the Premier League safety is in your own hands looking at the fixtures. Obviously, you got us this weekend, but then I'm looking at your remaining fixtures. You've still got to play Everton. You've got Sheffield United and Burnley on the final day, albeit all three of those away from home, which maybe gives you a slight disadvantage. And then all your home games, arguably out the six, probably the toughest three, which is sod's law. But really, it's a huge, huge opportunity for Forest. And obviously, you've been slightly unlucky. The the point deduction, I'm sure we could have a discussion on that on our own. But it'll be a really interesting end to the campaign. Let's talk about Nuno, though. Obviously, he's really well liked amongst Wolves fans. It turned a little bit bitter towards the end because, throughout COVID, the quality of football deteriorated. But what's been your opinion on him so far? Do you think he's done a good job at Forest? Where are you ranking him at the moment?
It's always going to be hard coming in after a manager like Steve Cooper. And actually, on pods, I've likened it to you guys' situation with Nuno. Like, obviously, you said it went a bit sour towards the end, and it did in patches with Cooper. But he's still a manager that's loved by the fan base that's risen us from being in the Championship for so long. And then following him, I looked at Wolves, and I mean, I'm the outside looking in here. I might be wrong, but he had Lopetegui and Bruno Lage the other way around. But they came in and they sort of looked a bit similar. They didn't really bring much difference, and because there wasn't much progression in the football and where you were in the league, that if the fans didn't sort of warm to him as much as they did the last manager. I don't know if I'm right in saying that.
Yeah,
But then
no,
Gary O'Neill obviously has came in and obviously blown everything away. Results help that, obviously. So I've likened it to that, really, because following Steve Cooper, Nuno was probably not going to be given as much time. Fans were patient with Coops, and we tried to give him the benefit of the doubt to stay behind him. But if results didn't come because it wasn't a popular sacking, I think the patience wouldn't have been there. We were helped by initial wins. We beat Newcastle and Man United in 2 of the 3 first games. We were scoring goals. He put Gibbs White, and we'll talk about him, I'm sure, back in the middle of the park where Cooper was playing him on the wing. And he really just brought some positivity straight away to the club. And everyone's thinking, wow, we could be looking up to finishing in the top half, let alone getting away from relegation, obviously. Then January came and it went a bit stagnant because we had the AFCON players go.
Yeah.
We had the winter break as well, and we played 4 cup games against a League One and a Championship side, and struggled to beat both of them. One was penalties, one was extra time, both in the replays, and it went stagnant, like I say. And then we've been a bit. I mean, personally, I've been disappointed by him. I think his team selection, he's dropped some of our most informed players at times. Callum Hudson-Odoi had really started playing well, and we've been waiting for that from him this season. But he started playing consistently from that left-hand side, and it was an option. And then Nuno dropped him for a couple of games, and everyone was thinking, what's that about? Nico Dominguez as well in midfield. He's dropped him of recently, and so some decisions have been a bit strange, but I think now we're settling on a side that we're happy with. We've been named an unchanged side against Tottenham for, I think it was the first time, particularly in the Premier League, under the new manager. And we look settled now. I think he looks settled. He's still not utilising the squad how I'd like to see him. We signed a couple of players, Ribeiro and Reina, in January, and they can barely get a kick, and it's quite baffling because they both do well on international duty. They both got decent pedigree, particularly Ribeiro as a young Portuguese striker. I'd think that would be the sort of player Nuno would want to see, but he's not really used them. So I think, much like the club feeling, the fans towards him have started to come round to him because I think he's settling a bit more and he's looking a bit more at home, which means that we're on his side a bit more. Whether he's the long-term choice, I'm not too sure yet. But if he can keep Forest up, it'll go a long way to convincing people like me that maybe, he's a decent choice.
Yeah, I am really intrigued to see, obviously, his progression as a manager and obviously his future, whether it lies at Forest or elsewhere, because obviously he did a fantastic job at us. And yeah, like I said, although it did go a little bit bitter towards the end, it was a very similar situation to Steve Cooper. I think a large proportion of the fan base still have huge feelings for him, but probably accepted that maybe his time at the club had come to an end, and it's probably a similar sort of situation. But I am interested because obviously he went to Spurs, didn't work out, did very well in Saudi Arabia, albeit, sort of was moved on before a real big influx of money. And I didn't really know where Nuno's level was going to be after that. So it's interesting that he took this job on because there was still a lot of pressure on you guys. But the consistency thing in regards to him playing the same lineup is an intriguing one, because I feel at Wolves, Nuno played his best football where he had pretty much an 11 that he was happy with. And that first season we were back in the Premier League, we could go 9-10 games in a row without him changing a thing. And that's really where we started to play our best football. So let's see if he does it again for you guys at the weekend. Is he changed much, George, in regards to system or tactics? In terms of the shape, has it changed much, or is it a similar sort of shape to how Steve Cooper was playing?
I think Nuno's a very similar manager to Cooper in that he's slightly more defensive minded and counter-attacking, which is possibly why I was brought in, because if you bring someone in, we were rumoured with like Glasner and Potter, who play completely different football, and if you bring someone like that in at mid-season, it could take a couple of months for that to come across, and by then the season could be gone. So I think because he was a similar manager, that's why he's brought in. He's, like I say, we were sort of playing a 4-3-3 under Cooper, and it's a 4-2-3-1 now. Gibbs White was on the wing, and for about 10 games, Gibbs White was on the wing. And you guys will probably know as well, that's certainly not his best position. It does a job, but when he's in the middle of the park with space and players running ahead of him, he's far better. So he did that and played two wingers either side of him, which we hadn't seen under Cooper all season. And instantly there was success there. I think we're more progressive in that we have less players behind the ball, and we can perhaps, when we win the ball, there's more players in front to drive. Whereas under Cooper, we maybe won the ball back, but didn't have an outlet, didn't have a way to go forward, and then it was coming straight back at us. And you look at the improvement in certain players, particularly Chris Wood. I mean, he looks like Maradona, like Ronaldo now under Nuno, whereas under Cooper, he was in there scoring goals and he had a few injuries, but he certainly wasn't at the level that we're seeing now. So he's improved certain players, Hudson-Odoi as well, someone that's really came on under him, and the system does suit our pacey players better, and it's sort of almost brought the best out of them. So yeah, it's not a complete change, but there's little tactical differences that I think have improved Forest and made us look a better side than what we were under Cooper. And that's painful to say because everyone loves Cooper. I love Cooper, and he's probably the best manager that I hold to my heart in my life. But we've got to acknowledge now that I think we are a better side under him, and he's made us look more competitive, certainly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Nuno at Wolves as well. He always, Jimenez was the main man until that injury. But even the Championship season, I think once he finds that right striker that he knows he can almost build a team around, I think that's it. That he'll get them scoring goals. Like for us in the Championship, we had Leo Bonatini. And I think Wolves jumped on it quite quickly when they realised he was drying up on goals. We went in the market and we found Benik Afobu, who ultimately got us across the line in the Championship. And then in the Premier League, up until his injury, Jimenez was the man. We'd never ever really changed him. So I think once Nuno finds his man, he can make things work. But we mentioned him earlier, Morgan Gibbs White, George. I mean, he was a player that I think unfortunately a lot of Wolves fans do dislike now for antics that have happened, obviously since he left the club and things that he said. But he's certainly picking up a lot more goal contributions this year, and I'm glad that Nuno has found a role for him because he really struggled. I think he liked Morgan at Wolves, but really struggled to find a way he can get Morgan to play consistently. And I don't think there were things behind the scenes which Morgan wasn't too happy about because Nuno brought him back and didn't quite play him. But the fact that he's playing now, probably in his better position, and he's getting goals and assists, isn't he? But how's he been for you so far this season?
Yeah, that was the question mark because him at Wolves didn't really get much of a shot under Nuno, and I suppose that's because you sort of played the back five, didn't you? And there wasn't that much maybe room for him. And I wondered whether he would go for the back five. I didn't think that suited us, and that's how we started the season. So I'm glad that he didn't. But yeah, like I say, he was on the wing under Cooper, but getting him in the middle was everything that he wanted. I think Nuno put confidence into him. He said, you're our main man, you're our main attacking sort of player. He's had the captain's armband a couple of times, and he's really taken that by the scruff of the neck. And I think it's consistency for him. He's now got Ilanga and Hudson-Odoi / Origi sometimes bombing down the wings. He's got options ahead of him, and that's when he plays at his best. I mean, he played against Fulham. I mean, that is up there with the best performance I've ever seen at the City Ground in the first half. He was confident. He could just everything that he tried could come off, and he's a player that doesn't have the consistency maybe. And that's probably why he's at a club like Forest. But when he's on his game, he is absolutely fantastic. Passes, flicks, pace. He's just got absolutely everything. I think we've been crying out for a bit of consistency in front of goal because he only had three goals before the Fulham game, 4 now, and only 2 from out of play. And from your attacking play, when we've got injuries up front, you want someone like Gibbs White, your attacking player, to contribute in front of goal. His assist numbers I think he's got 7 assists, but only 4 goals and 2 penalties. So I think at the minute he's probably in his best form. He relishes playing you guys, and hate him all you want because he thrives when the spotlight's on him. He absolutely thrives. So I'm looking forward to his performance this weekend. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, but it will be interesting. I mean, Wolves have slowed down a lot in form at the moment, and this is the type of game that I think Morgan Gibbs White will grab and try and take all the headlines for. And it will be interesting. What's the situation with Bolly as well, George? I mean, I haven't seen. Is he injured at the moment? Is he or?
Yeah, when is he not injured? Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
in fairness, he's obviously Murillo has captured all the headlines at centre half for us, but Bolly has looked the strongest. I think because Murillo's only about 6 foot, 6'1", Bolly next to him dominates in the air and he complements him very well. And for me, if he was fit, he'd start next to Murillo every day. But he went away for AFCON. AFCON really ruined us because we lost 7 players and they all came back injured basically. So
Yeah.
we lost them for 3 or 4 months, and only Aina, Sangare, and Bolly came back. So Bolly played. He missed. So March was when he played first against Luton, which was just before the international break. So that was his first game after AFCON. Then he went back out to represent Ivory Coast and got injured after 40 minutes for them.
Flipping
So
heck.
yeah, so he's out for the season, I'm pretty sure. So he won't be featuring at the weekend, unfortunately. No.
Yeah, again, a strange situation for him, leaving Wolves as well. But it's interesting times. Very quickly before we move on to score predictions, from the Wolves side, George, Hwang Chan possibly going to be back for Wolves. Pedro Neto is out, but Cunha possibly coming back. Out of those players or any other players, I don't know how much of Wolves you've caught this season, but anyone that's been impressing you so far this season for Wolves?
I tell you what, every time that we play against you, I'm really impressed with Kilman as well at the back. I think he's a really good centre back. Say he's homegrown, and I think he sometimes plays on the right and he's left footed. I'm really
Yeah.
impressed with the confidence that he's got. Lamina, I like Lamina in that midfield. I think he got shipped out by Southampton from the Premier League, but he's came back to look quite assured. I know he's lost his head a couple of times with a few red cards, but yeah, I've been really impressed with him. And Sarabia as well. I think Sarabia, in the absence of Neto and all your attacking players, I mean, if Hwang's back, I think he was doing bits for my fantasy team as well. So that'll scare me. But Sarabia, I think, has filled that void quite well, and he's probably not a natural number 9, is he? I don't know if he's playing that, but I think in the absence of the players you've got, I've been impressed by what he's done. And Ait Nori playing a bit more advanced now, which I mean,
Yeah, last couple of
baffling me a little bit.
games. Yeah, he played
Yeah,
more or less as a forward last week, but he did come off injured early. So again, it's sort of
right.
50-50 whether he'll take part. But yeah, Pablo
Yeah,
Sarabia has pretty much played off the striker out wide. But yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it very similar to what you've said there. Like he's really stepped up in terms of his goal
yeah.
contributions and so on. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting game, mate, because Forest, although like you said earlier, although they're sort of struggling to get consistent wins, are still being very competitive. With Wolves the last few weeks have really slowed down. I'm hoping that the return of the likes of Cunha and maybe Hwang will help us, but it's going to be a tough game away from home for Wolves. Have you got a score prediction for us before we finish off?
I'm never confident going into Forest games, but looking at our run in, we've got to get something from this game because you mentioned it earlier, and you look at our relegation rivals. Our best games are away. I think Luton play Fulham, Brentford, and Everton at home. I mean, they're 3 winnable games at home. Their away games aren't great, but if they get 9 points from that, then we've got to go away to Sheffield United or Burnley, who we only beat Sheffield United away this season. We drew to Burnley at home. So I'm not confident on us picking any points away. So we've got to target these home games and try and get 3 points. Saying that, I'm not confident that we will. I think you guys are a really good side this season, pushing for, doing as well as you can. So I'm just going to be boring and sit on the fence and say 1-1. I know that's not very interesting for the viewers or anything, but Morgan Gibbs White, I think will have a key part to play. He relishes these games, like I said. He'll get on the score sheet. So 1-1. That's what I'm saying.
No, I think I agree, mate. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it finishes 1-1 as well. I think it'd be a very close game. But yeah, interesting, mate. I do obviously hope we speak again next season. It's going to be a really interesting end to the campaign. And I think Forest, like I said, it's in your hands. But those
Yeah.
easier games are all away from home. So it really depends on how Nuno gets you guys set up. But all the best for the rest of the season, apart from Saturday. I'd love Wolves to pick up 3 points. But let's wait and see. But George, where can people find you in the podcast if they wish?
So my Twitter's linked on the handle, and also 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. You'll be able to hear our match report for that as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I also write for the Famous Club. So if the match is any good, I'll do a match report for there as well.
Brilliant. I'll make sure I leave all the links in the description down below, George. And thanks for jumping
Thank
on
you, mate.
Talking Wars, and I'll catch you soon.
Cheers, boss. Good luck with the season.
Cheers, buddy. So big thanks to George. I'll make sure I leave those links in the description down below if you want to catch any of their content. I think this is going to be a 1-1 draw, guys, unfortunately. I would love for Wolves to get 3 points, but for some reason, the last couple of weeks, I've just been a bit meh. Like, I've really not had the confidence in Wolves that I'd normally do. So I'm hoping I'm completely wrong. I really hope they, turn up for this one and we get the 3 points, but we'll wait and see. As always, I'll be back straight after the game with my thoughts. We'll have the fans react, and we'll have the podcast out on Monday or Tuesday reacting to the result as well, and much, much more. As always, be sure to hit that like button. Let's try and hit that 150 like target. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, guys. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll catch you all very, very soon.